Well, good day, brother James Smith. And label you as a community historian because you bring to us some things that we don't know or perhaps never heard of. And so today we're going to talk about a timely topic.
Dred Scott decision.
Mhm.
Um, he decided he thought that he could buy him and his family's freedom. Once that was denied, he decided to take it to court, and it went to the Supreme Court, and hence the Dred Scott decision.
So let me ask you this. What was the reason, perhaps, that Dred would have the audacity to think that he could sue for his freedom?
That's a great point. Where he lived at, he saw other free people, right? And the key thing is that his owner at the time, and here's where it gets, a little bit in the weeds, but it gives
Mhm.
context to it. Uh, his owner at the time had no problem with letting him live that way with his family, even though he was
Mhm.
considered quote unquote
Mhm.
property.
Mhm.
Um, when the owner died, the husband died. The ownership went to his wife. He went to the lady and said, "Hey, listen, um, I want to buy my family's freedom, my wife and my children's freedom." She said no. She actually wanted to hire him out, that kind of thing. And so with that, he decided to sue.
Mhm.
Yes, he decided to sue.
The audacity of the black man at that time.
Yeah, yeah. So, and
Uh,
that's one thing that gets into is that uh, when people don't see African Americans as human, their rebellions seem audacious. You know, Give Me Liberty or Death went for Nat Turner as well as Patrick Henry. But I won't go. I'll digress.
okay,
I
okay.
digress. I
So,
digress.
so he sues
Yes, he sued.
for his freedom,
Yes,
and what happened thereafter? Of course, he lost at that time.
he lost, but it's not the fact that he lost. Um, it's it's how he lost,
Okay.
and so the it was a 7-2 decision. Right now, if you were to Google anybody, just Google worst Supreme Court decisions in history. Uh, Plessy and Dred Scott will probably be up there 1 and 2 neck and neck, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Roger Taney wrote an opinion in reference to uh, Dred Scott. The the logic he used was based on the founders. He basically said, "Listen, when the founders, these great austere men, please read the decision. It's quite fascinating. When they put this Constitution together, Afro Americans were never meant to have any role other than that of servitude, right? If you look at the first article, I think Article 1 in Section 3 and Section 9, I think speaks to that. The infamous Three-Fifths Compromise. And then the other part that says, well, since at the convention they were arguing so much over slavery, let's kick it down the road. Let's not argue it now because it'll tear us apart. So let's just say we can continue to bring slaves in into 20 years after the Constitution is ratified. In other words, we don't want to deal with it because we can't handle it. So 1820 was another attempt to kick it down the road.
Mhm, mhm.
So in Roger Taney's decision, uh, the key point of the Missouri Compromise, um, the only part that we're concerned about is three components. But for our purposes of what we're talking about today,
Mhm.
um, it said that uh, slavery cannot exist above the 36th parallel. It just gave a line, and that was enacted by Congress.
Mhm,
So
mhm.
if you lived above that, you were free. And that's what Dred Scott was banking everything on. Hey, listen, Congress said I'm free. No slavery exists. I should be free. Roger back to Roger Taney, he said basically that the since Dred Scott was not considered a citizen, he had no right to even bring suit.
Right.
Right. And he went on to further say in it that the slave has no rights that a white man was bound to respect.
Mm.
And clearly, then basically he said that because of this, it invalidated the Missouri Compromise.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the gist of it. I could if listen, I Roger Taney is quite remarkable. I'll read an excerpt from his
Sure,
decision,
please
if you don't
do.
mind, excerpt because this is something that really needs to be understood. What was the frame at this time? The question is simply this: can a Negro whose ancestors were imported into this country and sold as slaves become member of the political community formed and brought into existence by the Constitution of the United States, and as such entitled to the rights and privileges and immunities, the 14th Amendment in there, guaranteed by the instrument of the citizen, one of which rights and privileges is suing the court of the United States of the Constitution. That means a right to sue. So that's the question. His answer is, quite frankly, we think that Africans are not, and that they are not included and were not intended to be included under the word citizens in the Constitution, and therefore claim none of the rights and privileges which instruments provide for which secure citizens of the United States. I mean, you don't even got the right to sue.
Right. So in other words, why are you here?
Yes.
Because we don't even recognize you as a citizen.
Yes.
Right. So this was his.
And so, and here's the part people don't think about. That not only killed Dred Scott's claim, what about the freedmen that were living up north?
Mm.
So this was nationwide. And of course, this exacerbated the tensions that eventually led to the Civil War, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, the premise of Taney's statement is that the only reason you were here was that of servitude. You have no rights that we are bound to respect. So you don't even have standing to even bring a lawsuit because you don't have standing as a citizen, and thus striking down the Missouri Compromise and everything like that.
Now you keep mentioning the Missouri Compromise. Give us an elementary discussion
Yes.
Of that.
Yes. So the Missouri Compromise, basically, there were tensions in the United States about control of Congress, right? It actually started with the Constitutional Convention, large states versus small states. The southern states wanted to count their slaves, three-fifths compromise. They wanted if a slave state was going to be admitted, then you have to admit a free state to keep the balance in Congress, to keep things fair. So the Missouri Compromise sought to address that. The first thing it did was it brought Maine in as a free state. Maine was created as a result of the Missouri Compromise. Shout out to our New England brothers and sisters. And then brought Missouri in as a slave state. And then it said that in the territories that were not considered states yet, but were developing, it said slavery cannot extend past a certain line. And that's the 3630 parallel. So geography students, if you go look at 3630 parallel, you can see the line where slavery cannot exist. So basically, that was a stopgap because the country at that time, it's called the antebellum period before the Civil War, in constant tension over slavery and constantly about to fall apart over slavery. So the Missouri Compromise was just a piece of Band-Aid to keep it in place. What Roger Taney did, he ripped it off.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Right. All right. So we have now the Dred Scott's decision.
Yes, sir.
So now let's move us from that decision to the next step for rights and
Yes, sir.
citizenship. What happens?
Yes, sir. So, ironically, and as a side note, Dred Scott did eventually get his freedom uh,
Mhm.
in 1857. Uh, it was actually purchased by his former owner, believe it or not. Unfortunately, Dred Scott died in 1858, so he only enjoyed 1 year of freedom. On a side note, um, but the next step was the Civil War and the 14th Amendment,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And so basically, what you have is after the Civil War. Another side point reference in history, when Lincoln won the presidency in 1861, it was Roger Taney that swore him in. The,
Oh,
the irony, right? The irony. But
oh yeah.
nevertheless, back to the 14th Amendment.
Mhm.
Uh, so the after the Civil War, the country had to grapple with how do we incorporate these newly freed, formerly enslaved people into society. And they came up with three. They're called the Civil War Amendments, right? Uh, 13th Amendment, 1865, ending slavery.
Mhm.
Uh, the 14th Amendment, which is crucial, uh, I think that's 1868, gave you rights as citizens. And then, of course, the 15th Amendment, uh, I think 1870 or 72, please fact check me on that, but gave us the right to vote. But the 14th Amendment is sandwiched in between those two.
Mhm.
And what the 14th Amendment did, the 14th Amendment actually invalidated the Dred Scott decision, kind of
Right.
like the Brown case invalidated Plessy versus Ferguson. And so the key thing in the 14th Amendment, if you read it, first of all, do equal protection of the law. And it says all persons born and naturalized in the United States are considered citizens, just paraphrasing it.
Mhm.
Privileges,
Mhm.
privileges and immunities and things of that nature. And they are entitled to due process of the law. So the 14th Amendment is crucial because it gave African Americans its rights as citizens, as any other person in the country. So it said. So it said.
Right. 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 Right.
So
Right.
it
Right.
said.
Right. Yeah,
Yes.
I was going to mention because all these amendments didn't necessarily activate the rights.
Uh, so what we've learned, uh, a law is only as strong as the people willing to enforce it.
Right.
Um, and as far as standing, as far as application, is only as useful as the judge that is interpreting it.
Right.
And
Right.
we will definitely get into that.
Right.
If you look at especially the 14th Amendment, it was pushed in Congress by this group called the Republicans, Radical Republicans, right? The Republicans pushed for now listen, there's a clear difference between the Republicans in 1860 and the
Hmm.
Republicans today. That's a whole nother conversation. So I don't want people, but
Right.
you
Right.
gotta
Right.
understand the numbers. So African Americans made up the majority of the population in places like Mississippi, in places like South Carolina, in places like Louisiana, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
when you got these citizenship right and voting rights, you had African American senators. You had senators from rebels in Louis. I think Hiram rebels in Mississippi. You had a black governor in Louisiana. I think Pinchback.
Hmm.
So and the entire delegation. So there was power in those numbers. So it was for political expediency as well, right?
Hmm.
So, but either way, political expediency, benevolence, Afro Americans were able to enjoy um, a modicum of freedom or during that time period of Reconstruction when the 14th Amendment was put in place.
Mm-hmm.
But no, but the 14th Amendment was specifically, even though it says all persons born and naturalized are considered citizens as a blanket statement, it was clearly intentionally created for African Americans because those were the only people at that time who were formerly enslaved.